After my last video, I got a lot of interesting responses from the New Age community on both TikTok and YouTube. And today I'm going to be responding to one person in particular that goes by the name _metaphysician. The comment they brought up is that the Gnostic texts weren't made any later than other books in the New Testament, and that they were taken out by the Catholics because they wanted control. They also said that you can love Jesus and still be a New Age. So the question is, were these Gnostic texts written at the same time as the New Testament Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? And if so, were they taken out, or even worse, burned by the Catholic Church that was trying to seize control and hide the real Jesus that is revealed in these Gnostic texts? Can you be a Christian and a Gnostic at the same time? These are the questions we're going to be discussing today. First, when we say Gnostic text, what do we even mean by Gnostics? Who are they? Well, they were a group that believed that the Old Testament God written in the Bible was not the original creator God, but just one of the offsprings of the real God of the eons. But that this God of the Old Testament made the earth, and that's a bad thing because the material world is bad. But they think Jesus is good because they see him as a liberator that came to save humanity from their bodies and take them into the spiritual realm. They see Jesus more not as a redeemer, but a revealer of secret knowledge to only a secret select few people. So the big question is, were these Gnostic texts written at the same time as the New Testament Gospels? Well, in order to answer that question, we have to know when the New Testament Gospels were written. Many scholars fall along the lines of saying that the Synoptic Gospels, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, were written in the 50s and the 60s. Also, for those who don't know, Jesus died between 30 and 33 AD, and many people lean more along the lines of 33 AD. So that means that some of Jesus's youngest followers and disciples were in their 50s and 60s, and people in their 30s and 40s grew up hearing actual stories from eyewitness testimonies that witnessed these events. And let's not forget that most of Paul's writings were written even before the Gospels were composed. Okay, now that we have something to compare it to, let's look at these Gnostic Gospels and see if they really were written around the same time as the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. Well, interesting fact number 1 about the Gospel of Thomas is that it actually quotes from a lot of the New Testament, over half actually. What does that tell us though? It tells us that it's late. For example, you have quotations from John, which was not written down until the 90s, so in the Gospel of Thomas. So how was the Gospel of Thomas supposed to be from the 50s and 60s if it has material that didn't get written down until the 90s? Another interesting problem that arises is when you look at the origins of where this comes from. What I'm referring to is the Syrian development that is inherent in this text. For example, when they refer to Thomas, what do they refer to him as? They refer to him as Judas Thomas, which is a name that was only found in the Syrian church and nowhere else. Another interesting fact that comes up is that when you read this text in Coptic or Greek, it seems to just be 114 random sayings. But if you translate it into the Syriac language, it actually startlingly has so many connections that make it not a random sayings, but linked interdependently throughout the whole text. So you have distinctive Syrian sayings, you have Judas called Judas Thomas, you have Syriac catchwords, and you have over 1/2 of the New Testament accounted for in the Gospel of Thomas. What does that all lead to? It leads to the Gospel of Thomas being dated to the end of the 2nd century, around 175 at the earliest, and more likely closer to 200 AD. Even serious scholars that hate the Bible say that this should not be included in the text as scripture. So check number 1, the Gospel of Thomas definitely wasn't written during the time of the Gospels, but I truly, humbly believe that the people that are advocating that this should be in the Bible maybe have not even read the Gospel of Thomas, because if so, you'd find in there some very hateful and bigoted teachings that I don't think anybody could agree with. For example, in saying 114, it says, Simon Peter said to them, Mary should leave us, for females are not worthy of life. Jesus said, see, I am going to attract her to make her male, so that she too might become a living spirit that resembles you males. For every female that makes itself male will enter the kingdom of heaven. You see, that is so strange and very much against women. Another weird saying from the Gospel of Thomas is, if you fast, you are sinning. If you pray, you will be condemned. If you give to the poor, you will hurt yourself spiritually. Once again, these quotes seem very, very outlandish compared to the other New Testament gospel teachings. Okay, let's look at another gospel, the Gospel of Peter. The Gospel of Peter was actually written about by early Christians as a docetic text. What that means is these people didn't believe that Jesus was really a physical body. For example, if he was walking in the sand, he would leave no footprints because he was not attached to the material world. Once again, tracking back to that Gnostic belief that the material world was bad and the spiritual world is good. So for this, let's just jump into the story and take a look at some of the things it says in order to evaluate it. You get the stone rolling away from the tomb, and out come two angels with heads that go up to the clouds. I'm not kidding, this is what it actually says. And then, after that, comes a third figure with a head that goes even above the clouds. But wait, there's one more figure that's going to come out. And it's a cross. It's a cross that comes out. Hovering, rolling on wheels, it doesn't say. But you have two angels with heads as big as the clouds and another figure with a head that goes even above the clouds. And then you have a cross coming out. And then a heavenly voice comes and says, "Have you preached to those who have fallen asleep?" And it's not Jesus who responds. It's the cross that says yes. How can anyone really try to make the claim that this talking cross, giant cloud head text is as real and historical and true as the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Okay, we're gonna look at two more Gnostic texts. That way people don't say I left out any of the good ones. The next one we're going to be covering is the secret Gospel of Mark. This has two very interesting facts that I'd like to point out. First, it describes a story of when Jesus heals a young man, and then that young man comes to him later at night wearing a linen cloth covering his naked body. Then that young man spends the night with Jesus so that Jesus could reveal to him the secret of the mystery of the heavens. Very interesting, but more interestingly is fact number 2 about this text is that it was discovered to be a hoax. And very much of the scholars that looked into this believe that the guy who found the text is the one who actually forged it himself. You can look this up on the internet, it's widely documented. The guy's name is Morton Smith. They knew it was a forgery, and they really do think that it's him because of two things. The forger's tremor, which is the way that they look at the handwriting and can tell how something has been forged. And the second thing is when they compared the Greek letters between the guy and the text, they found that two very distinctive letters were almost identical. The same scholars that will disregard the Bible and say, no, like it's not true, it's fake, it's yada yada yada, will jump so quickly on the bandwagon of something like this, which later gets discovered as a hoax. So it makes me wonder, like, do these people have something against the Bible? Do they have some axe to grind? Do they have some vendetta against the Bible that they are just so easily misled and pulled astray by something like this? The last gospel we're going to be talking about is the Gospel of Judas. You see, this papyrus of the Gospel of Judas was dated around 300 to 320 AD. But we actually have earlier information about this gospel written by one of the early church fathers in around 180 AD, condemning it as false history. Even Bart Ehrman, who is one of the most unfriendly people towards the Bible, many of you probably already know him, say that there is no scholar that believes that Judas actually wrote this, nor anyone even associated with the disciples, and it is more likely that this is just Gnostic propaganda and writing that was used in a deceptive titling to furthermore push the Gnostic ideas of the time. But I'm not going to get off that easy. Some people say that in AD 303, Emperor Diocletian destroyed all of the manuscripts up to that point, and later Emperor Constantine came and made brand new manuscripts which they used to add in new stuff like Jesus is the Son of God and the divinity aspects of that. And that's why we don't have any manuscripts before the 4th century when this has supposedly happened. I'm going to answer this question by quoting someone actually not too far from me at Dallas Theological Seminary. His name is Dan Wallace, and he is regarded as one of the top New Testament scholars that we have on earth to this day. So, Dan Wallace says that Diocletian did not destroy all the Christian manuscripts. He did destroy several, but mostly in the east and south. As far as having no manuscripts prior to the 4th century, well, we have more than 4 dozen in Greek alone that are prior to the 4th century. And these manuscripts have numerous passages, John 1:1, John 1:18, John 20:28, Titus 2:3, Hebrews 1:8, 2 Peter 1:1, that affirm the deity of Jesus. So it's nonsense to say Jesus' deity wasn't invented until the 4th century when you've already got the evidence in earlier manuscripts. It seems that people think that when the Bible was being put together, people had 10 texts in front of them, say, and they just arbitrarily picked 4, then they're like, we'll put this in the Bible. Rather than, if that was the case, then yes, this is dogmatic, prejudice, bias stuff in the Bible. But if there was good reasons to believe that only 4 of them had connections to really early 1st century writings, and the actual apostles that did life with Jesus, and the other ones had no connection and no chance of being connected because of the content, because of the dating, because of where it was written, then it's not dogmatic or prejudice, it's just good history. The only way to deny this is to say, I don't care about the evidence, I'm just gonna lean on my own intuition to tell me what I think is true. But the problem with that is that's exactly what people are complaining about. That's called being dogmatic and prejudiced. So friends, the big recap. Were these Gnostic Gospels as reliable or even more reliable than the Gospels in the New Testament text that we have here today? Absolutely not. What you can learn from them though, for example, in the Gospel of Thomas, you can learn something about 2nd century mysticism. In the Gospel of Mark, it's just a big hoax. The Gospel of Peter, well, with its giant, huge heads that reach up to the clouds and talking crosses, it doesn't pass a credibility test. And the Gospel of Judas and others like it were just written way too far after the fact to give any new insights into historical credibility. I'll say this very clear. The Gnostic depiction of Jesus as revealer rather than redeemer, and also that we all have divine sparks of light in us, that we attain salvation through self-knowledge and enlightenment, has no connection to the real historical Jesus found in the 4 Gospels. So can you be a Christian and a Gnostic? The answer is quite clearly no. Because fundamentally, they believe contradictory, very different things. So yes, you can love Jesus even if you're a Gnostic or a New Ager, but it seems that the Jesus that you'd be loving is a made-up Jesus of your own. But why even do that? Why even make up your own Jesus when you can get to know the real Jesus by reading the New Testament Gospels that deliver a historically reliable, early attested, real story of Jesus? The reason where it might be very tempting to do that is because true Christianity is tough. It doesn't say that you're just a divine spark of light, that you are God's, that you can just continue to grow in prideful, selfish wisdom and eventually be liberated from your body. No, it says that you are a sinner in need of redemption, but the redemption can come by Christ Jesus, and then every day after that you die to self and live alive to the person who God called you to be. And you can't just tot around spirituality and mysticism and pretty much make your own do-it-yourself spirituality like is so common on Oprah and in the New Age community. No, that's not the case. There's a real historical Jesus. He says some real things about you and me and how to live life. And it's best that we look into those things. The real Jesus did exist. You can read about him in the New Testament Gospels and know that that is the real Jesus. And he wants you. He wants you to follow him. Will you follow him?